Hello, everybody. Hello. Welcome to Conversations with Kristen. This is a series that I'm going to be featuring for the month of February on Monday nights. Tonight we're doing 8:15, but the future sessions will be at 7 p.m. on Monday nights. And I occasionally do a Conversations with Kristen series around topics related to mental health, wellness, diet culture, consistency, change, and just really things that I have learned through my work as a therapist and as a coach, as common roadblocks, mental, physical roadblocks that people experience when they are trying to do better, trying to get their lives together, trying to get out of their own way, trying to stop self-sabotage, and really just unsure of how to actually make that happen in tangible ways. So this series is specifically going to be about thinking traps, thinking patterns, our thought life around change. So we're still talking about taking action. We're still talking about wellness, fitness, even nutrition, all those things. But as most of you guys know, that half the issue, if not more than half of the issue, is our mindset. All right. Once our minds change, once we improve our thought life, things in the tangible, in the real world, start to at least look differently. If not being experienced differently, we are at least viewing our situation in a way that's more empowering, that's more realistic, etc., etc. So, if you are joining me live, feel free to comment, ask questions. I want this to be interactive. I want to actually help you all with some of the challenges that you may be having in this area, but we are going to be in a series of thinking traps for the course of this month, okay? So I'm going to go through the four most common thinking traps that I hear people struggling with, that I personally, y'all, when I tell y'all about this one today, I was like, you know what, Kristen, that's a good one, because that sounds like you. But doesn't it sound like us all? But I'm going to be taking a thinking pattern or a thinking trap each week and going into it further, giving you signs, for that thinking pattern, but also solutions that you can take with you in any perspective there within that is beneficial to you. So the first topic, the first area of thought life that we're going to talk about is unrealistic expectations. Okay? This is a thinking trap. Okay? A lot of times when I think about the expectations that you set for ourselves, nobody else really set them there. It's our own measurement. It's our own doing. We set the expectations. We take it up 5 notches to make it unrealistic, and then we hold ourselves to this standard that is either impossible or self-defeating or bound to fail, right? And so that's a thought life thing. A lot of the expectations that we hold are not based on the reality of the situation or anything that someone else has put on us. It's usually a us versus us type of thing, right? So, unrealistic expectations are these plans and goals and ways of life and ways of being that we place on ourselves that, based on what we have going on in our real lives, are just unrealistic, It's not saying that it wouldn't be possible if the conditions were 100% right. But who's perfect? You know what I mean? Who's operating out of perfection these days or ever? You know what I'm saying? So it's not in not understanding how our goals can be unrealistic, our expectations can be unrealistic. We're setting ourselves up for something that was bound to happen, and it's not our own doing that we're just not good enough. It's that the standard itself was too high. All right. So I'm going to give you some signs. I'm going to give you some signs first. And you all just let me know if I'm stepping on anybody's toes but my own, okay? You may have unrealistic expectations if you have a polarizing approach to your goals. What does this sound like? This is hot and cold. I'm either hot and I'm ready to go after it, or I'm completely cold. It's black and white. It's either this way or it's no way, or it's all or nothing. I'm either giving 100% or I'm giving 0%. Polarizing approaches to goal setting, right? I hear so many people say, man, when I am invested in something, when I have a set, outcome, and I'm just, I go all in, but man, I'm cold when I'm cold. I'm off. When I'm off, it's like night and day, right? Um, that is a sign of unrealistic expectations. That's kind of the cycle that it sets you up for. You go so hard at something at a bar that is just too high, you burn yourself out, and then now you're on the ground. Or some people never even start working towards the goal because the bar is too high. You know, let's think about, I don't know, anything. I was thinking of monkey bars when I was little, right? It's like if I'm a 5-year-old and I'm looking at the big kid monkey bars, you know, like the ones for the middle school kids, I'm not even about to try and jump up there and figure it out. I can already tell it's too much, right? So I'm not going to do it, you know? But if I take my 5-year-old self over to the 5-year-old section of the playground, now it's more realistic. Now I actually could see me getting up there and grabbing a hold and keeping my bearings and my strength as I go across. You see what I'm saying? So that's just an example of how having extremely high standards can actually make you take no action at all. All right. And a lot of people will think, oh, I'm just being lazy, or I'm just not motivated enough. And it's like, no, that bar is way too high. Okay. Another sign, little to no grace is planned or extended. Okay. So we got a plan. It's an excellent plan, or it's a really tall order, and there's no foresight or proactive planning for grace. Like, okay, what happens if I need to, you know, go left, or I need to go right, or I need an off day, or I need to reconfigure some things? We don't even think about that in the planning stage. We're like, no, this is going to go exactly according to plan. I'm going to execute it, and it's not going to, like, for example, with the Walk and Journal Challenge that I host in May, it'll be coming up this May, not planning for rainy days. Okay. Some people were just like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about what I was going to do if it was raining outside. It's like, yeah, we got to plan for the grace. What are we going to do? And, you know, maybe that's not the most aligned example, but for example, you know, let's plan for the obstacles. Let's plan for the days where maybe your energy is low, or let's plan for the days when you aren't able to fully meal prep something like you would have on, like, you know, on the best week ever. You know what I'm saying? Like, where is the grace, and can you give yourself that grace? Or do you find yourself being super highly critical of yourself, right? Now, a lot of people will say that they are much more critical of themselves than they are of other people. They extend all the grace in the world to other people. They understand why they're doing things the way they're doing, whatever the case may be. But for whatever reason, when it comes to doing that for self, we are our worst critics. You know, we are beating ourselves up. You should have done this. Why can't you do that? Now look what you've done. Now you're too far gone. I can't believe you let yourself get this way. And that's not the language that we necessarily use with other people. However, sometimes on the flip side, on the low key tip, sometimes we can actually feel like we're giving grace to other people, but if we really sit and think about it, and this is just, you got to be honest with you, I'm gonna be honest with me, okay? You know, we say that we're only hard on ourselves, but if you really sit with your thought life and the expectations that you may have of other people to show up for you, or to do things the way that you would do them, or maybe even resentments that you might hold from doing something for someone else and then not returning the favor and being hypercritical of that, if you sit with it, you might find that you actually are a bit critical of other people as well, or that you hold them to a standard that's pretty tall as well. Now, that doesn't mean that you're telling them that. That doesn't mean that you're harping on them like you do in your own head. But if we look close enough, sometimes you will find that you actually might be hard on other people too. Because if we expect ourselves to operate with excellence, it would just be natural. Excellence, even, I would say excellence is one thing, but perfection is another. If we expect somebody to operate with perfection, and or if we expect ourselves to operate with perfection, chances are that some of that is spilling over into how we expect things to go with other people, and then we're left disappointed. So your inner critic is loud and proud, right? And this may spill over into the way that you think about or engage with other people as well. Another thing that I will say from this is that if you have unrealistic expectations, you might struggle with pivoting when things don't go right, right? So this kind of goes back to the all or nothing headspace. It's just like, okay, my plan didn't go exactly how I wanted. Not only am I done, but now I'm all thrown off. I'm struggling. I can't navigate the gray. I can't find a way to move through with what I was given, the cards I was dealt. It's really frustrating. It's irritating. I'm bothered. I'm discombobulated. You know what I'm saying? When we have unrealistic expectations, a sign of that might be that you struggle when it's time to like think differently, think outside the box, or think on your feet, or, you know, okay, plan A didn't go well. Can I move past plan A and get to plan B? Okay. So I talk about this with my clients in my accountability group and in my beginners and intermediate programs. It's either they did the workout or they didn't do it. And sometimes I want to say, okay, well, I understand that maybe you didn't have enough time to do the strength workout that was planned. Well, why not go for a walk? Why not still hold space for that? Why not find, okay, well, I get that maybe you didn't have access to the equipment that you normally would this week. What would it look like to do everything body weight? And it's just like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Or they're frustrated with having to think that through. Okay, so what do I do? I'm like, you would just do body weight squats instead of weighted squats. You know what I'm saying? And I know I'm making it sound easy, but literally when you are planning for a certain week to happen and something goes left on a Monday or Tuesday, it can be very hard to pivot mentally to be like, okay, how can I make the best of this? How can I make the best of this and just move forward with what's possible now with the time that I have left? Okay, so if you're just joining in, I am giving some signs of unrealistic expectations. And unrealistic expectations is our first thinking trap in this series that we're talking about for this month. And so the signs of that are you have a polarizing approach to your goals, all or nothing, hot and cold, black and white thinking. There's little to no grace planned for or extended. Your inner critic is loud. Inner critic or critic of others could be loud as well. And you struggle with pivoting or making the best of a situation once that plan falls through. Ooh, that spoke to me. One thing, I'll tell you, this is a side note. One thing about being an entrepreneur, that's probably the biggest skill that I've had I've had a hard time learning it, but I have had to learn it, and it has been an asset. It's like entrepreneurship or just anything really. I mean, we all have our things that we're doing. It's like 9.9 times out of 10, it's not going to go as planned. So all of your skill, all of your mental effort is actually going to be going into figuring out the gray and making the best of something. You know what I'm saying? Like, there just used to be a lot of perfectionism in the way that I used to do things, and I just realized this isn't going to work. This is not going to work to continue to have expectations that are super, super high. And then lastly, I kind of talked about this before, but not planning for obstacles, all right? When we have our tunnel vision on that unrealistic expectation and that goal, we don't think about what happens if. And then again, I've talked about, operating in the gray, preparing to extend grace. But there needs to be a specific plan for the obstacles that you know you're going to face. Okay? So if you know there's a certain month out of the year, or a certain week out of the month, or a certain day out of the week, a certain time of the day where you're going to struggle with something, you need to plan for it. For example, those of us who struggle with emotional eating at night, maybe, you know that every night at 6, 7, 8, 9, whatever time it is, that's an obstacle that you're going to face. How are you preparing for that? You could go into your nighttime hours and just be like, you know what? I'm just not going to do it today. I'm just not going to. I'm just going to stop and it's going to be fine. And that would be I'm not going to say that's an unrealistic expectation. That's just a very high one. Okay. And it may be that you don't, binge eat or emotionally eat or stress eat or whatever. But why not plan for the obstacle? What happens if you're emotional and you're bored or you're stressed or you're anxious or you're sad and you're crying? What are you going to do during that time? Plan for the obstacle, right? So I'm already into my strategies. I was supposed to wait and do strategies the second half. But anyway, I do want to give you 3 ways, and I'll just kind of hone in on those from what we've already talked about. But 3 ways you can start to combat this, okay? And the first one and probably the most important one is that sometimes you have to practice being average, okay? I know that sounds counterintuitive to the messages maybe that we've been raised under, culturally speaking, or societally speaking. Is that how you would say that? Or by society standards, or by what has worked for you to get to the place that you are now. Many of us are, all of us probably are, successful in whatever we have strived to do at this point in our lives. And a lot of times that comes from having those high expectations and just not letting up on the gas, right? But we all know that works until a certain point, and then now we're at a place where it's like, okay, am I going to continue doing this for the rest of my life? Is this the life that I want to live while I'm hitting my goals financially, work-wise, family, personal, wellness, whatever, but is the energy and the pressure around it something that I want to experience? Or do I want to be able to enjoy reaching my goals and enjoy embarking on new journeys with a sense of peace about it? And maybe even excitement, and not pressure and like this daunting feeling of having to make sure that you are 100% successful. So I want you to practice being average. What is it like to just be in the gray for a little bit? I talk about this with people with fitness all the time. Because particularly when I was doing personal training in person pre-pandemic, I would have people that would come and say, or really it happens with the online questionnaires that I send out and stuff too. I ask people, how often can you commit to working out? And they'll say every day. Every day. Not everybody says every day. Some people know. Some people are like, hey, I can give you 3. I can give you 2, 3. But there's a large number, significant number of people who will say 5, 6, 7 days a week. And I'm thinking, is that on a good week, or is that on a, like, what kind of week are we talking about? Like all 52 of them? Or are you just talking about like, that one time in the summer when you were free and on vacation? Like what type of week are we talking about? And so every time I have to reel them back in to doing something average, which is usually 3 times a week. And most people are like, oh wow, a coach just asking me to work out 3 times a week? And I'm like, yeah, I feel like that's a realistic place to start. And what you do is you remain consistent with 3 days a week for some time to establish a new baseline, which is 0 to 3, right? I haven't been working out, or I haven't been working out on a structured plan. And then now I'm going to venture into doing a structured plan 3 days a week for a month, for 60 days, for 90 days. And then I can work up towards 4, and then I can work up towards 5. There's really no rush to 5, 6, and 7 days of working out at the beginning. And it's an unrealistic expectation that will almost for sure lead to burnout. The second one is to build your confidence and positive self-view, okay? A lot of times if we're struggling with unrealistic expectations, it can also come from overcompensating for what we feel that we lack in other areas, right? Our self-worth or our confidence is dependent upon an external success. And so this happens with weight loss. People come and want weight loss because their self-esteem and their view of themselves is so low, and they put all of the solution into weight loss, but they never really change their confidence. They never really improve how they view themselves. They think that the weight loss is going to do it for them. So either they lose the weight, now they still feel the same, or they don't lose the weight and now they feel worse. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, either way, there's no improvement because the internal work was not being done along the way, right? So we've got to make it, and this is hard work, y'all. This is not easy to do, but we've got to work towards our goals while also building ourselves up independent of our achievements, okay? We are all worthy of love, affection, attention, good things, good experiences, fun, laughter, happiness, just because. And that's just my personal belief, and I think that could tap into, spiritual aspects of things too, in the eyes of God. That's truly how I feel about each of us. And so there's no doing, and there's no performing, and there's no expectation or standard that we can hit that changes that truth as it stands. Now, we can be good stewards of our gifts and take care of our bodies and show gratitude and appreciation by taking care of ourselves, but there is no outcome that changes the reality of who you are, but you have to believe that for yourself. You have to know that. And that takes time. That takes time of building up. What do I like about my character? What do I like about my integrity? How have I shown up in ways that I can be proud of in my life in general? Those are the ways that we build that up. Helping other people, not out of obligation, but out of passion and out of fun and out of care is another way. Because I know there's a lot of helpers out here. We're helping in a lot of different ways, but sometimes those the ways that we help people have strings attached in a way that makes it seem like it's just, it's just day in the life, you know what I mean? As opposed to doing good in the world and feeling like you're having an impact on the world. I guess it's a more collective ideal. But anyway, build your confidence and a positive self-view. You got to get in that mirror and say some positive affirmations. You got to listen to some music, some worship music. You got to read some poems. You got to get on an Instagram account with positive, it doesn't have to just be like, superficial positive vibes, but with encouraging, empowering words that build you up. You've got to surround yourself with that mentally and physically. And then the last thing is you've got to ask for help. Okay? We weren't meant to try and overcome things on our own. I literally just got off a phone call talking about this, where just talking about, the benefit of having a therapist, or the benefit of, having that extra step, that if you're expecting yourself to overcome everything that you've been through, navigate your current present life in, whatever that looks like, obligations and stressors and everything, and then also change your future at the same time, that's a lot to have to do on your own in just 24 hours. You know what I'm saying? That's a lot to have to do. What does it look like to ask for help so that those unrealistic expectations become shared with something, and then we spread them out across a support system of people, right? I think about this with accountability. Intrinsic accountability and holding yourself accountable is important. I mean, eventually you're going to have it. But there are seasons where we need to lean on the accountability of something else, of another person, of a group, whatever the case may be. That's okay too. All right. But what we do with our high expectations is that if I really want it, I'll do it myself, and nobody will, all these different shoulds and ways of thinking that I don't know where we've collected it, but it comes from somewhere. We think about that and we set ourselves up for failure because we don't access the help that we need. So it's like, why not get some help? So my expectations are up here by myself. When I access help from someone else, it brings it down a little bit. Now it's being shared instead of just a tall order for me. Now I've poured a little bit out of my cup, and someone else is filling in the gaps, or something else is filling in the gaps. It makes all the difference to realize that there's spaces where you don't have to do something on your own all the time. There will be times where you will have to do it on your own, but it's not all the time. And that goes back to that all or nothing polarizing thing of feeling like you have to do it by yourself all the time. So those are my tips for today. Ways to improve unrealistic expectations and that thinking trap is to practice being average. That's the number one. Well, honestly, they're all kind of number one, but practicing being average, building your confidence in your positive self-view, and asking for help. You do those three things consistently over time. I think you will find that there's freedom in pulling back from unrealistic expectations, and you might find that you exceed what you thought you could do just from letting go of that thought, letting go of that thinking trap that really ultimately just holds you back into disappointment. Okay? So that's all I have for today. Thank you all for joining in. Feel free to share any comments, ask any questions.